Notre Dame knocked off Navy 42-3 on Saturday, and I know my man JD Pickell, on three national college football analyst, was watching the game. So I figure, hey, let's bring on my boy JD. Let's talk about the game, folks. Please do hit the thumbs up on this video. Of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel for more Notre Dame football content. But yeah, JD, appreciate your time, man. Just your initial reaction: Notre Dame 42, Navy to 3. There was no other games for you to watch. I know you were dialed into this one. What'd you think about the Irish on Saturday?
Dude, I wasn't the only one dialed in. I mean, Sam Hartman, if you hadn't told me that that was his first game at Notre Dame, his first game in that offense with that wide receiver group, there was no way to tell. I mean, going into that game, you're kind of wondering, okay, how in sync are they going to be? How's the rhythm going to be? Is the timing going to be there? 82% completion percentage. And the way that it looked, they were on time. I mean, that throw to Jaden Thomas in the back of the end zone, money. He has to ad lib, hit Jaden Greathouse after he scrambles, keeps his eyes downfield. Like everything just looked so natural and in sync. And the way that it felt coming out of that game, I understand it's Navy, but the games that Notre Dame is going to be able to play, just stylistically, you think this team has a brand new gear with Sam Hartman playing quarterback, which is why they brought him to South Bend. So it's Navy, but even so, I mean, there were some ways for this game to potentially be tricky with the triple option and it being overseas. Like a lot of external factors that could have made this a little bit of a tricky spot, but they handle business and on to the next. The legend of Sammy football in South Bend has begun.
I like it, JD. So you've done a lot of video coverage for On Three about Notre Dame, and please do, and I'll pin it in the comments of this video, the On Three national page on YouTube, which is fantastic. JD does a phenomenal job. Again, you've talked about Notre Dame a lot. You've talked about Hartman. That's always the main talking point. But was there any guys like, dang, I didn't know about this guy? Like, I learned a lot about this guy in watching that Notre Dame Navy game.
I think people kind of got introduced to Audric Estime, who was a guy that was there last year, but I mean, he's first team all downhill. I mean, the way
Yeah.
that he got North and South last year, ran behind his pad, or yesterday and last year, but ran behind his pads really well. I was really impressed with him. And then also Jaden Greathouse. I mean, for him to be a true freshman and to step in that spot, it's week 0, it's against Navy, but still like a nationally televised game, and it's your first time in collegiate action. For him to have the game that he did, a lot of people wondering, hey, is there going to be a wide receiver that separates from this group, a guy that's going to be able to kind of be that potential number one go-to? I know he's just a true freshman, but 2 touchdown catches, his first time out of the chute in collegiate action, like you got to feel pretty excited about what he's going to be. So I think those 2 guys, if that's the baseline for them in week 0, I'm really excited to see how they progress and the way they could change the way that Notre Dame plays going forward.
Yeah. From a Notre Dame standpoint, like Irish fans knew a lot about Audric Estime, but I think from a national standpoint, that was kind of like his introduction. Like he's RB1. Like my brother texts me. He's like, "Hey, bro, I want to bet on the game. Like, tell me about Notre Dame's offense." He's like, "Do they have a good running back?" And I said, "Yeah, they got little Jerome Bettis back there, man. Audric Estime, yeah, running downhill." So definitely agree with you there. You touched on this, JD, but was this more to do with Notre Dame being good or Navy being bad? I'm assuming your answer is it's a little bit of both, right? Or a lot of both. But it's just interesting because, man, as good as Notre Dame looked on both sides of the ball, you do have that context. It was a Navy team that probably is not very good.
And there were some things, like we said, that could have made it tricky for Notre Dame. I mean, in the early going, that first drive for Navy, they were getting some chunk runs there. Like they looked like they kind of had a rhythm going, and you're sitting there saying, okay, if Notre Dame doesn't figure out how to defend this option here, this could get interesting if that kind of becomes the tempo setter of this game. And Marcus Freeman said post game, like, yeah, they showed some things that we hadn't seen on film. So we had to kind of collect ourselves, make adjustments on the sidelines, and go forward from there. And obviously we saw with them scoring 3 points the entire game, they adjusted just fine. So I think even though it wasn't, the test they're going to get going forward this year, you feel really good about the fact that they handled a difficult trip to another country and playing in a different setting and playing let's just call a spade, like kind of an awkward and sometimes boring offense to defend that requires a ton of discipline. So I think there's a lot of victories to take away from within this victory if you're a Notre Dame fan. But even so, I mean, you take it for what it is. It was a game against a team that you were supposed to handle how you did, and kind of on to the next one, but you like the base that you set.
Yeah, absolutely. So Notre Dame hosts Tennessee State. I believe it's the 3:30 p.m. Eastern time kick. Usually Notre Dame games in that window are 2:30, but I guess it gets pushed up like the 3:30 because the Big Ten's on NBC now, which is a whole different discussion for a different day. But then September 9th at NC State, that's a 12 p.m. kickoff on ABC. So really do that first true test at NC State. Then you get Central Michigan at home. Well, I'm curious what game you'll be watching on September 23rd. At that 7:30 p.m. Eastern time window. You think you might be watching Ohio State Notre Dame?
I hope so, man. I mean, we're going to find out a lot too about Florida State this upcoming weekend, or I guess, yeah, it'll be a Sunday. It'll still be the weekend. If they drop that game to LSU, I mean, that game against Clemson kind of becomes, do or die for Florida State in terms of their playoff hopes. But no, I mean, Notre Dame, Ohio State, the way that Notre Dame handled business yesterday, I think that just intensifies the intrigue around that matchup, because the way that it went last year in Columbus with Tyler Buckner playing quarterback, no disrespect to him, but just like we talked about earlier, there's a new gear now for this Notre Dame football team. And so the way that they could potentially, force Ohio State to match scores with them, like that's a sentence we didn't think we'd be saying, a year ago with what they had offensively. So no, that's one that I would imagine a lot of eyeballs will be glued to, and I will be no exception, without a doubt.
So the banner underneath us says, "Can Sam Hartman lead Notre Dame to a college football playoff?" So it's actually a pretty difficult schedule for Notre Dame. The at NC State, like Louisville, Duke, like some of those ACC teams are tough. And then you got the big three games that we've been talking about at Blue and Gold for several months: home Ohio State, home USC, at Clemson. I mean, like, again, it was Navy, but if this Notre Dame offense does continue to churn, I mean, Notre Dame's got three very experienced linebackers. The defense looks pretty good. You got some darn good cornerbacks in Ben Morrison and Cam Hart. Like, if this team kind of hits that ceiling and dips into that potential with Sam Hartman at quarterback, I mean, could we be talking about like an 11-1 team that gets into a 3 or 4 slot in the playoffs?
I think it's a super realistic conversation to have. And like you mentioned, there's some of those games that you can't have a letdown performance against, like at NC State, I think is going to be a tremendous litmus test for us to find out more about Notre Dame. But to your point, with those big three games, what they have, Ohio State, USC, and Clemson, all three of those teams, pretty sizable question marks in different spots. Like Ohio State, I understand they have 2 5-stars in that quarterback room, but I don't know that you can just copy and paste the amount of production that C.J. Stroud had last year to either one of those guys. I mean, Cade Klubnik and Garrett Riley, I love Cade Klubnik, but I think the sample size on him is still very limited. And one of those sample sizes we have from the Orange Bowl isn't necessarily like a glowing performance. USC, are they going to play defense? Because yesterday, I understand that they were, week 0, still getting a lot of things figured out, a lot of talent. But even so, like, I don't know if that defense that you saw yesterday from USC is one that you want to trot out against Notre Dame. So all three of those games for all three of those teams, like they have a lot to figure out as well. So for Notre Dame, I said it on one of our shows, like regardless of how you slice it, they're going to have their say on the college football playoff and how it turns out, for the fact of, one, they could just make it in themselves, and two, they could ruin any of those three teams' chances to get in the dance themselves. So it's going to be a gauntlet. And if Notre Dame does run the table and goes 11-1 or 12-0 and finds their way into the college football playoff, I just want to get out ahead of this. I think the people that watch this channel probably already know, but there's this kind of narrative that Notre Dame's not in a conference, so their schedule was easy. Like, no. If Notre Dame goes 11-1, 12-0, punch their ticket and get them to the front of the line to be in the college football playoff, because that schedule, they will have earned it, and that is emphatically the case.
Yeah, I kind of went with a bold prediction preseason. I was like, I'm going 11-1. Like, let's just lay it out there. They're predictions. They're, college football so unpredictable. Things can be, in a bad way or in a really good way in terms of surprises. The over/under season win total for Notre Dame was actually 8.5. I was curious what yours was.
Theft. I mean, that's stealing, right? That's stealing. You tell me I can drop all three of those games and still have the over hit? Like, that felt like, I felt a little bit like, man, I don't know if this is morally okay for me to take the over because somebody in Vegas feels like they messed up. Maybe the intern set that line, Mike. I don't know.
Yeah, if an intern set in the Notre Dame season total line, that would certainly be an interesting choice by Vegas. Well,
Summer
JD,
project.
so, yeah, for sure. JD, really appreciate your time, folks. Again, check out the On3 National YouTube page if you're a Notre Dame fan. Not only is JD always talking about the Fighting Irish on his, update videos, and then also his live shows as well. But if you're just a college football junkie as well, you're going to want to check out what he is saying about college football. Please, folks, hit the thumbs up on this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. He's JD Pickell. I'm Mike Singer, and we will catch you guys next time.